Sir Edmund Hartley had 30 seconds to live, and he was smiling. The champagne glass trembled in his hand as he raised it toward the veiled painting, the masterpiece that would destroy him. He just didn't know it yet. The Ashworth Gallery gleamed under crystal chandeliers, their light catching the gold frames of centuries-old artwork that lined the burgundy walls. October rain lashed against the tall windows, each gust of wind making the velvet curtains shudder like living things. Inside, warmth and cigar smoke mingled with expensive perfume, creating an atmosphere thick with privilege and secrets. Detective Marcus Blackwood stood near the marble fireplace, his handlebar mustache twitching slightly as he observed the assembled guests. He hadn't wanted to attend this particular unveiling, but Lady Margaret Ashworth had been insistent. "A mystery painting, Marcus?" she had said over tea 3 days prior. "No one knows its origin. Even Edmund is intrigued, and you know how difficult that man is to impress." Now, watching Sir Edmund prepared to toast the mysterious Renaissance work, Blackwood felt an inexplicable unease crawl up his spine. 20 years of detective work had given him an instinct for danger, and every nerve in his body was suddenly alert. Eleanor Hayes appeared at his elbow, her green eyes bright with excitement. "Isn't this thrilling, Mr. Blackwood? A lost masterpiece discovered in some Italian villa and brought here for its first public viewing. They say it might be a Caravaggio." "They say many things, Eleanor," Blackwood murmured, his gaze fixed on Sir Edmund. The art critic's face was flushed. Whether from champagne or excitement, it was difficult to tell. But there was something else in his expression, something that looked almost like triumph tinged with fear. Lady Margaret Ashworth, the gallery's owner and tonight's hostess, stood beside the massive veiled painting. At 63, she possessed the kind of beauty that came from good breeding and better jewels. Her silver hair was swept into an elegant chignon, and diamonds glittered at her throat. She raised her own glass, and the room fell silent. "Distinguished guests," her voice carried effortlessly across the gallery, "tonight we witness history. This painting has been authenticated by our most respected experts. It has survived centuries, wars, and the passage of time itself. And now we share it with you." 8 other guests formed a semicircle before the veiled masterpiece. Blackwood's trained eye catalogued, each one with the precision of a man who had spent decades reading human nature. Oliver Ashworth, Lady Margaret's nephew, stood closest to the painting. At 35, he had the dissipated look of a man who had never worked for anything in his life. His evening jacket was expensive but poorly fitted, and his eyes held the calculation of someone always measuring his inheritance against his debts. Beside him, Dr. Catherine Wilde adjusted her spectacles nervously. The restoration expert was 42, brilliant, and perpetually anxious. Her fingers were stained with the chemicals of her trade, and she kept glancing at the painting as though it might vanish if she looked away. James Thornberry, the art dealer, swirled his champagne with practiced elegance. At 58, he had made a fortune authenticating and selling works to the wealthiest collectors in Europe. His smile never quite reached his eyes, which were pale blue and calculating. Victoria Somerset stood apart from the others, her posture rigid with disapproval. The elderly woman, she must have been 70 if she was a day, was dressed entirely in black, and her expression suggested she had come to a funeral rather than a celebration. Blackwood knew her by reputation, the widow of a war hero. She had devoted her life to charitable works and had a particular passion for returning looted art to its rightful owners. Behind her, Marcus Pembroke, no relation to Blackwood despite the similar name, fidgeted with his champagne glass. The insurance investigator was 49, methodical, and possessed the kind of face that disappeared in a crowd. That was probably an asset in his line of work. Near the windows, Isabella Frost stood with the confidence of youth and talent. At 31, she was the youngest artist ever to have a solo exhibition at the Ashworth Gallery. Her modern sculptures had scandalized and captivated London in equal measure. She watched the proceedings with barely concealed disdain. As though Renaissance masters were beneath her notice, Inspector Carter stood near the door, technically off duty but unable to resist an invitation from Lady Margaret. He caught Blackwood's eye and raised his glass slightly in greeting. The two men had worked together on enough cases to have developed a mutual respect, though they approached their work from very different angles. And finally, there was Reginald Foster, the rival art critic whose reviews could make or break an artist's career. At 65, he was Sir Edmund's oldest friend and greatest professional enemy. They had been competing for the same prestigious position at the Royal Academy for 3 decades. "Sir Edmund," Lady Margaret continued, "would you do us the honor?" Sir Edmund stepped forward, his champagne glass still trembling slightly. The room held its breath as he approached the veiled painting. When he spoke, his voice was uncharacteristically hoarse. "I have spent 40 years studying art," he began. "I have seen forgeries that could fool the angels themselves. I have witnessed the authentication of works that museums would kill to possess." He paused, and Blackwood could have sworn he saw the man's gaze sweep across the assembled guests with something like accusation. "But I have never seen anything quite like this." He raised his glass higher. "To truth in art, may it always come to light, no matter how deeply it is buried." The toast was oddly phrased, almost threatening. Several guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, but they raised their glasses. Dutifully and drink. Sir Edmund brought his champagne to his lips and took a long swallow. Then, another. The color drained from his face so quickly. It was as though someone had pulled a plug. The champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor with a sound like breaking ice. Sir Edmund clutched at his throat, his eyes wide with sudden, terrible understanding. "Edmund!" Reginald Foster rushed forward, but Lady Margaret was faster. She caught the critic as he fell, lowering him to the floor with surprising strength. Blackwood was already moving. His years of investigating murders had taught him to act while others stood frozen in shock. He knelt beside Sir Edmund, checking for a pulse, even as the man's lips turned blue and foam appeared at the corners of his mouth. "Eleanor, fetch my medical bag from the car," Blackwood commanded. "Inspector Carter, secure all exits. No one leaves this room." But even as he gave orders, Blackwood knew it was too late. Sir Edmund Hartley's eyes had already glazed over, his final expression a mixture of fear and betrayal. The man who had spent his life critiquing art had just become part of a very different kind of masterpiece, a murder staged with theatrical precision. "Is he ... Lady Margaret's voice broke. "Dead," Blackwood confirmed grimly. He looked up at the assembled guests, all of whom had gone pale. "And unless I am very much mistaken, he was poisoned." The word hung in the air like smoke. Then chaos erupted. "Poisoned? That's impossible." Oliver Ashworth backed away from the body. "We all drank from the same champagne." "Not quite," Blackwood said quietly. He stood and walked to where Sir Edmund had been standing. The shattered champagne glass lay in a pool of expensive wine, but a few drops had splattered onto the marble floor. Blackwood knelt and sniffed carefully. Beneath the yeasty scent of champagne, there was something else: bitter almonds. "Cyanide," he said. "Fast-acting and lethal. The question is how it got into his glass specifically." Inspector Carter had positioned himself at the gallery's main entrance. "I've locked the doors. No one is going anywhere until we sort this out." He pulled out his police whistle. "I'll call for backup and the medical examiner." Dr. Catherine Wilde was shaking so badly that Isabella Frost had to steady her. "This is horrible," the restoration expert whispered. "Simply horrible." Edmund was just about to unveil the painting. He was so excited this morning when I saw him. He said tonight would change everything. Change everything how? Blackwood's attention sharpened. What did he mean? I don't know. He wouldn't say. Just kept muttering about truth and consequences. Blackwood filed that information away and turned to Lady Margaret. Tell me about the champagne service. How were the glasses distributed? Lady Margaret had composed herself, though her hands still trembled. The champagne was served by my butler Harrison about 15 minutes before the unveiling. He brought them out on silver trays pre-poured. I thought it would be more elegant than having guests serve themselves. Where is Harrison now? In the kitchen, I presume. Preparing the canapes for after the unveiling. Her voice caught. After what should have been a celebration. Eleanor returned with Blackwood's medical bag, though they both knew it was futile. The detective made a show of examining the body more thoroughly, but his mind was racing through possibilities. A pre-poured glass of champagne, a room full of suspects, a victim who had made cryptic comments about truth coming to light, and that painting still veiled, looming over the scene like a silent witness. Mr. Blackwood, Victoria Somerset spoke for the first time, her voice steady despite the horror. Shouldn't someone cover poor Edmund? It's not dignified leaving him like this. Nothing about murder is dignified, Mrs. Somerset, Blackwood replied. But you're right. Eleanor, if you would. Eleanor draped a velvet cloth over the body with gentle efficiency. As she did, Blackwood noticed something clutched in Sir Edmund's left hand, something he had grabbed in his final moments. Inspector, Blackwood called softly. Look at this. Carter joined him, and together they carefully pried open the dead man's fingers. A small piece of paper fell out, no larger than a calling card. On it, in Sir Edmund's own handwriting, were 3 words. The signature lies. What does that mean? Carter frowned. Blackwood looked at the veiled painting. I believe it means Sir Edmund discovered something about our mysterious masterpiece. Something someone was willing to kill to keep hidden. James Thornbury stepped forward, his professional composure cracking. That's absurd. The painting has been authenticated by 3 separate experts, including Dr. Wilde. The provenance is impeccable. It survived in an Italian villa for nearly 400 years. Perhaps, Blackwood said mildly, but Sir Edmund clearly believed otherwise. Dr. Wilde, you authenticated this painting? The restoration expert nodded miserably, along with Professor Hastings from Oxford and Monsieur Dubois from the Louvre. We all agreed it's genuine. The brushwork, the pigments, the canvas age, everything checks out. And yet Sir Edmund, one of the most respected critics in England, believed the signature was false. Blackwood walked slowly toward the veiled painting. Lady Margaret, may I? Marcus, the unveiling was meant to be. A man is dead. I think we can dispense with ceremony. Lady Margaret nodded reluctantly. Blackwood grasped the velvet cover and pulled. The painting emerged like a ghost from the shadows. It depicted a scene of classical beauty Venus rising from the sea, her pale skin glowing against a dark background. The technique was masterful, the use of light and shadow creating an almost 3-dimensional effect. In the bottom right corner, barely visible, was a signature, Caravaggio, 1598. For a long moment, no one spoke. The painting was breathtaking, even in the circumstances. Then Reginald Foster, who had been silent since his friend's death, laughed a harsh, bitter sound. Edmund was right. He knew. God help him, he knew, and it killed him. All eyes turned to the elderly critic. What did he know? Blackwood asked quietly. Foster's face crumpled. I can't. I promised him I wouldn't speak of it until he was ready. Until he had proof. Your friend is dead, Mr. Foster. Whatever promise you made him, I think he would release you from it now. The old man looked at the painting, then at the body beneath the velvet cloth. Finally he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. 3 days ago, Edmund came to my house. He was agitated, frightened even. He said he had discovered something about this painting, something that would shake the art world to its foundations. He said the painting was a forgery, a brilliant one, but a forgery nonetheless. And he said that when he announced it tonight, someone would try to stop him. The room erupted again. Dr. Wilde's denial was the loudest. That's impossible. I staked my professional reputation on that authentication. And that, Blackwood said softly, might be precisely the problem. He turned to Inspector Carter. We need to interview everyone here separately, and we need to examine every champagne glass in this room, including the ones that were never used. As Carter began organizing the interrogations, Blackwood stood before the painting, studying it with eyes trained to see beyond the surface. Somewhere in this room was a murderer who had killed to protect a secret. But what secret? If the painting was a forgery, who had created it? Who stood to lose the most from its exposure? Eleanor appeared at his side. Mr. Blackwood, I've been thinking. If Sir Edmund knew the painting was a forgery, why did he come tonight? Why not simply announce his findings? An excellent question, Eleanor. And I believe the answer is in what Reginald Foster just told us. Edmund wanted proof. He suspected the forgery, but he needed to be certain. And I think he intended to use tonight's unveiling to force someone's hand. But whose? Blackwood's gaze swept across the assembled suspects. Each had their own reasons for being here. Each had their own secrets. And one of them had turned those secrets into murder. That, he said grimly, is what we must discover. Before our killer realizes we're getting close and strikes again. The gallery's clock chimed midnight. Outside, the rain continued its relentless assault on London's streets. Inside, the game had begun, a game of lies and truth, of art and death, of brilliant minds locked in a battle where the stakes were nothing less than life itself. Detective Marcus Blackwood adjusted his hat and prepared to do what he did best. Unmask a killer hiding behind a masterpiece of deception. The investigation had only just begun. Asterisk, asterisk. The library of the Ashworth Gallery had been converted into a makeshift interrogation room. Inspector Carter had cordoned off the main gallery as a crime scene, leaving Sir Edmund's body covered and guarded while the medical examiner made his way. Through London's rain-soaked streets, Detective Marcus Blackwood sat in a leather wingback chair. His fingers steepled beneath his chin as he studied the first suspect. Eleanor Hayes stood by the window, her notebook ready, her keen mind absorbing every detail. This was the part of detective work she loved most, the careful unraveling of human nature. The way truth emerged from layers of deception like a painting revealed beneath old varnish. Lady Margaret Ashworth sat across from them, her composure nearly perfect. Nearly, but not quite. Blackwood noticed the way her fingers worried at her diamond bracelet, twisting it round and round her wrist. Lady Margaret, Blackwood began gently. Tell me about how this painting came into your possession. I purchased it 6 months ago from a private collector in Florence, she replied, her voice steady. A Count Rossetti. His family had owned it for generations, but he had fallen on hard times. Death duties, you understand. The estate needed liquidating, and you had it authenticated immediately. Of course. I'm not a fool, Marcus. I hired the best after Wilde, Professor Hastings, Monsieur Dubois. They all agreed it was genuine. Her composure cracked slightly. I invested £200,000 in that painting. My entire inheritance from my late husband. If Edmund was right, if it's a forgery, I'm ruined. Eleanor made a note. £200,000 was a fortune enough to kill for, certainly. But was Lady Margaret the type to commit murder? She had known Sir Edmund for decades. They had been friends, or as close to friends as people in their social circle could be. Did Sir Edmund give you any indication he doubted the painting's authenticity? Blackwood asked. Lady Margaret hesitated. That hesitation told Blackwood everything he needed to know. He did, didn't he? She closed her eyes. 3 days ago, he came to see me privately. He said he had concerns, that something about the signature troubled him, but he wouldn't elaborate. He said he needed to study it more carefully, that he might be wrong. Her eyes opened, sharp with sudden anger. I thought he was being paranoid. Edmund could be insufferable when he wanted attention, and yet you invited him to tonight's unveiling. I invited everyone who mattered in the art world. I wanted this to be the triumph of my career as a collector. Her voice broke. Instead, it's become a nightmare. Blackwood nodded to Eleanor, who escorted Lady Margaret out. As the door closed, he turned to Inspector Carter. She's hiding something, but I don't believe she's our killer. The financial ruin would be real if the painting is exposed as a forgery, but murdering Edmund here at her own gallery would guarantee an investigation that might reveal the truth anyway. Unless she's betting we'll never prove the painting is fake, Carter suggested. Perhaps. But my instinct says no. Bring in the nephew, Oliver Ashworth. Oliver entered with the swagger of a man who had never faced real consequences. He sprawled in the chair, his evening jacket open, his tie loosened. But Blackwood noticed the sheen of sweat on his forehead despite the room's chill. Mr. Ashworth, how well did you know Sir Edmund? Barely at all. Met him at a few gallery openings. Pompous old bore, if you ask me. Always going on about brushstrokes and composition. Who cares? Art is supposed to be enjoyed, not analyzed to death. And yet here you are at an exclusive art unveiling. Oliver's smile was sly. I'm here because Aunt Margaret insisted, and because I have a vested interest in her success. I'm her only heir, after all. Eleanor's pen scratched across her notebook. The words motive, inheritance practically wrote themselves. So if the gallery prospers, you prosper, Blackwood observed. Eventually, yes. Not that I'm wishing the old girl dead. She'd probably outlive us all, the way she's going. He paused. But I'll be honest, Detective. If that painting turned out to be a fake, it would have destroyed her. And destroyed my inheritance along with it. Where were you when the champagne was served? By the fireplace, talking to that insurance bore Pembroke. We were discussing the weather, if you can believe it. Dullest conversation of my life. Did you see who distributed the champagne glasses? The butler, Harrison. Carried them on silver trays like we were royalty. I took mine from the left tray. Sir Edmund took his from the right, I think. But I wasn't paying that much attention. Blackwood dismissed him and leaned back in his chair. He's a wastrel with a gambling problem, I can see the signs. But is he clever enough to poison a specific champagne glass? Anyone could have tampered with the glass before the butler brought them out, Eleanor suggested. If they knew which tray Sir Edmund would choose from. An excellent point. Let's speak to the butler. Harrison proved to be a weathered man in his 60s, with the dignified bearing of a servant who had spent 40 years in service to the Ashworth family. He was deeply shaken by the murder, his hands trembling as he recounted the evening's events. I poured the champagne in the kitchen approximately 20 minutes before the unveiling, he explained. Lady Margaret prefers Bollinger 1928. I placed 9 glasses on 2 silver trays, 5 on one, 4 on the other. Then I brought them to the gallery. Did you leave the trays unattended at any point? Harrison's face flushed with shame. For perhaps 2 minutes. I had to return to the kitchen to fetch the proper napkins. Lady Margaret is very particular about the linens, and during those 2 minutes, anyone could have approached the trays. Yes, sir. I'm afraid so. Blackwood's eyes narrowed. Did you notice anything unusual about any of the glasses? Any sediment, discoloration, anything at all? No, sir. They all appeared identical to me. After Harrison left, Eleanor voiced what they were both thinking. The killer could be anyone in that room. They all had access to the champagne trays during those crucial 2 minutes. Not quite, Blackwood said thoughtfully. The killer needed to know which glass Sir Edmund would take. That requires either an intimate knowledge of his habits or a way to direct him to a specific glass. What if the killer poisoned all the glasses on one tray, gambling that Sir Edmund would choose from it? Possible, but risky. They couldn't be certain others wouldn't die as well. No, this was targeted, precise, the work of someone who understood Sir Edmund's patterns. Dr. Catherine Wilde was brought in next. The restoration expert was still trembling, her eyes red from crying. She clutched a handkerchief as though it were a lifeline. "Dr. Wilde," Blackwood said gently, "I understand this is difficult, but I need you to walk me through the authentication process for the Caravaggio." She nodded, sniffling. "Of course. Standard procedure, we examined the canvas, analyzed the pigments, studied the brush strokes under magnification. Everything indicated a genuine 17th century work. The crackler, that's the pattern of cracks in old paint, was consistent with a painting of that age. The pigments matched what Caravaggio would have had access to. But Sir Edmund believed the signature was false." Her face crumpled. "I don't understand how he could have thought that. We examined it so carefully, unless..." She stopped, her eyes widening. "Unless what, Dr. Wilde?" "Unless someone created a forgery using genuinely old materials. If someone took a lesser 17th century painting and painted over it, using period-appropriate pigments." She looked horrified. "It would be nearly impossible to detect without destroying the painting to examine the underlayers. Is such a thing possible?" "Theoretically, yes. There are forgers skilled enough, but the level of expertise required would be extraordinary. You'd need access to authentic old canvases, original pigments, the technical skill to replicate Caravaggio's style perfectly." She paused. "Actually, there's only one person I know capable of such work." Dr. Wilde's voice dropped to a whisper. "Professor Adrian Blackwood. Your brother detective." The name hit like a physical blow. Eleanor gasped audibly. Inspector Carter straightened in his chair. Blackwood's expression remained neutral, but inside, his mind was racing. His younger brother Adrian had been the art world's golden boy, a restoration genius whose skill was matched only by his ambition. 10 years ago, he had been caught selling forged Renaissance drawings. The scandal had destroyed his career and driven a wedge between the brothers that had never healed. "My brother," Blackwood said carefully, "is serving a prison sentence in Italy for art fraud. He was released 4 months ago," Dr. Wilde said miserably. "I only know because I received a letter from him. He wanted to apologize for involving me in his schemes years ago. I never responded, but I kept the letter. It was postmarked from London." The room fell silent. Finally, Blackwood spoke, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "Did Sir Edmund know about my brother's release?" "I don't know. Perhaps. Edmund was meticulous about tracking forgers." After Dr. Wilde left, Eleanor approached Blackwood cautiously. "Sir, are you all right?" "Perfectly all right, Eleanor. The fact that my brother is in London and may have created this forgery changes nothing about our investigation. If anything, it makes it more imperative that we solve this case properly." He stood, adjusting his hat. "Bring in James Thornberry. I want to know more about the provenance of this painting." The art dealer entered with the smooth confidence of a man accustomed to high-stakes negotiations. He settled into the chair and regarded Blackwood with cool appraisal. "Mr. Thornberry, you verified the provenance of the Caravaggio. Tell me about Count Rossetti." "Impeccable lineage. The Rossetti family has been collecting art since the Renaissance. The Count's grandfather purchased the painting in 1847 from the estate of a Venetian nobleman. Before that, it had been in the same family since the early 1600s. You're certain of this? I examined the documentation myself. Sales receipts, family inventories, letters referencing the painting. Everything was in order. Could such documentation be forged? Thornbury's smile was thin. Mr. Blackwood, anything can be forged if one has sufficient skill and resources. But I saw the original documents, yellowed paper, period ink, appropriate seals. If they were forgeries, they were masterworks in themselves. And you stand by your authentication? I do, though I confess, Sir Edmund's accusation troubles me. He was not a man given to wild theories. Yet you stand to lose a significant commission if the painting is revealed as a forgery. Thornbury's eyes hardened. I stand to lose far more than a commission, Detective. I stand to lose my reputation. If I authenticated a fake, I might as well retire. No collector would ever trust me again. He leaned forward, which is precisely why I would never authenticate a painting I had doubts about. My reputation is worth far more than any single sale. After Thornbury left, Blackwood walked to the window. The rain had intensified, turning the London streets into rivers of darkness. Somewhere out there, if Dr. Wilde was correct, his brother was hiding, and possibly connected to a murder. Sir, Eleanor said softly, what if your brother is involved? What if he created the forgery and killed Sir Edmund to prevent its exposure? Then I will see him hanged, Blackwood said quietly. Family does not grant immunity from justice, Eleanor. If Adrian is guilty, he will answer for his crimes. But even as he spoke, doubt gnawed at him. His brother was many things, arrogant, ambitious, reckless, but was he capable of murder? 10 years ago, Blackwood would have said no. Now, he wasn't certain of anything. Inspector Carter appeared in the doorway. The medical examiner has arrived. He confirms cyanide poisoning. He estimates Sir Edmund had perhaps 30 seconds between ingestion and death. The dose was massive. Whoever did this wanted to make sure there was no chance of survival. Bring in Reginald Foster, Blackwood ordered. It's time we learned exactly what Sir Edmund told him. The elderly critic looked as though he had aged a decade in the past hour. He sat heavily in the chair, his hands shaking as badly as his voice. Mr. Foster, you said Sir Edmund came to you 3 days ago with concerns about the painting. I need you to tell me everything, he said. Foster's eyes filled with tears. He was my oldest friend. We competed professionally, yes, but we respected each other. When he came to my house, he looked frightened. Truly frightened. He said he had been studying photographs of Caravaggio's authenticated signatures, comparing them to the signature on this painting. He said there were subtle differences, the way the C was formed, the spacing between letters. Things most people wouldn't notice, but Edmund had spent 40 years studying such details. Did he say who he thought created the forgery? Asterisk, asterisk, no, but he said something odd. He said, the forger is brilliant, Reginald. Perhaps too brilliant. They couldn't resist adding their own touch, and that's what gave them away. I asked what he meant, but he wouldn't elaborate. He said he needed to examine the painting in person one final time to be certain. And you're certain he didn't tell anyone else about his suspicions? Foster hesitated. He mentioned he had written a letter to be opened in the event of his death. He said it contained all his findings. He asked me to deliver it to the Times if anything happened to him. Blackwood felt electricity shoot through his veins. Where is this letter? At his home, I presume. In his study. He kept all his important documents there. Inspector Carter was already moving toward the door. I'll send men to search his house immediately. But Blackwood held up a hand. Wait, if our killer knows about this letter, they may try to retrieve it first. Inspector, I need you to go personally. Take 2 constables. And be careful, we may not be the only one searching Sir Edmund's study tonight. As Carter hurried out, Blackwood turned back to Foster. This detail about the forger adding their own touch, do you have any idea what Edmund meant? I've been thinking about nothing else since he died. Forgers often can't resist leaving a signature of sorts, something that proves their skill even if only they know it's there. It's a form of pride, I suppose. The arrogance of artists who believe themselves cleverer than everyone else. After Foster left, Eleanor voiced the question that had been building in her mind. Mr. Blackwood, if your brother created this forgery, would he have left such a clue? Adrian always was arrogant, Blackwood admitted. He believed himself the most talented restorer of his generation. If he created this forgery, yes. He might have added something, a subtle detail visible only to someone who knew where to look. Then we need to examine the painting more carefully. They returned to the main gallery, where the Caravaggio still hung in its position of honor, now surrounded by police tape and guarded by a young constable. Blackwood studied the painting with renewed intensity, looking for anything that seemed out of place. The technique was masterful, the chiaroscuro, the handling of light and shadow, the delicate rendering of Venus's face. But as Blackwood stared at the painting, something began to trouble him. Something about Venus's eyes. Eleanor, bring me a magnifying glass. Under magnification, the detail became clear. In the reflection of Venus's eyes, so subtle it would be invisible to casual observation, was a tiny image. A paintbrush. And on that paintbrush, letters so small they were barely visible. A.B. Adrian Blackwood, his brother's signature, hidden where only the most careful observer would find it. Blackwood felt his world tilt. His brother had created this forgery, and Sir Edmund Hartley had discovered it. But did that make Adrian the killer? Before he could process this revelation, Inspector Carter burst back into the gallery, his face grim. Sir Edmund's house has been ransacked. His study was torn apart, and the letter, if it ever existed, is gone. The investigation had just become infinitely more complicated. The killer had been one step ahead of them, and somewhere in London, a murderer was covering their tracks with ruthless efficiency. We need to find my brother, Blackwood said quietly, and we need to do it before anyone else dies. But even as he spoke, he wondered, when they found Adrian, would he be the killer they sought? Or would he be the next victim? Asterisk, asterisk, the rain had finally stopped, but London remained wrapped in darkness. Detective Marcus Blackwood stood before the Caravaggio forgery, his mind working through the puzzle pieces with methodical precision. His brother had created this masterpiece of deception, but who had wielded the poison? Eleanor Hayes returned with 3 cups of strong tea. Mr. Blackwood, we still have 3 suspects we haven't properly interrogated: Victoria Somerset, Marcus Pembroke, and Isabella Frost. Bring in Mrs. Somerset first, Blackwood said. I want to understand why a woman, dedicated to returning stolen art, would attend the unveiling of a potentially looted painting. Victoria Somerset entered the library with the bearing of a woman who had faced far worse than a police interrogation. At 70, she possessed a steel spine and eyes that missed nothing. She sat without being asked, folding her gloved hands in her lap. Mrs. Somerset, you have quite a reputation for exposing fraudulent art sales and returning looted pieces to their rightful owners. Why were you here tonight? Because I suspected Lady Margaret's painting was not what it claimed to be, she said bluntly. Not a forgery, detective. Stolen property. Blackwood's eyebrows rose. Explain. 3 months ago, I received an anonymous letter suggesting that the Caravaggio being offered by Count Rossetti might be the same painting looted by Nazi forces from a Jewish family in Florence in 1943, the Goldstein family. They were art dealers before the war. After liberation, their entire collection was presumed destroyed or lost. But I've spent 30 years tracking Nazi looted art and I've learned that nothing is ever truly lost. Eleanor was writing furiously. Did you share these suspicions with anyone? I wrote to Sir Edmund 2 months ago. He was intrigued and agreed to help me investigate. We planned to examine the painting's provenance together after tonight's unveiling. If it was indeed the Goldstein painting, we intended to demand its return to the family's surviving heir, a granddaughter living in New York. Blackwood felt the case shifting beneath his feet like sand. Did Lady Margaret know about your investigation? I don't believe so. Edmund and I were discreet. We had no proof yet, only suspicions. Her voice hardened. But someone knew. Someone who had everything to lose if the truth came out. Mrs. Somerset, where were you when Harrison left the champagne trays unattended? I was in the powder room. I returned approximately 1 minute before the unveiling began. I saw several people near the trays: Oliver Ashworth, James Thornberry, and the insurance investigator, Pembroke. After she left, Blackwood turned to Eleanor. 3 potential motives now. The forgery itself, the looted art angle, and possibly something else we haven't uncovered yet. This case has more layers than the painting. Should we bring in your brother, sir? If he created the forgery, he might know who commissioned it. If we can find him. Adrian has always been excellent at disappearing when convenient. Blackwood's jaw tightened. But first, let's speak with Pembroke. Insurance investigators have a talent for uncovering secrets people want buried. Marcus Pembroke proved to be as unremarkable in person as his reputation suggested. He was the kind of man who could stand in a crowd and vanish from memory 5 minutes later. But his eyes were sharp, calculating, and deeply nervous. Mr. Pembroke, you insure valuable artworks. Did your company insure Lady Margaret's Caravaggio? We did, for the full £200,000 she paid. Standard policy: theft, damage, fire, all the usual risks. He paused. But not forgery. Never forgery. If the painting turned out to be fake, Lady Margaret would bear the loss entirely. That must have concerned you. Pembroke's fingers drummed on the chair arm. It concerned me greatly. 3 weeks ago, I received an anonymous tip suggesting that Caravaggio might not be genuine. I hired an independent expert to examine it quietly. He found nothing conclusive, but he had doubts. Did you share these doubts with anyone? I told James Thornberry. He dismissed my concerns entirely, said my expert was a hack. Then I made a mistake. Pembroke's face flushed with shame. I told Sir Edmund. I thought he might help verify the painting's authenticity. Instead, he became obsessed with proving it was a forgery. He said if he was right, it would be the art scandal of the decade. Blackwood leaned forward. Mr. Pembroke, if Sir Edmund had publicly declared the painting a forgery at tonight's unveiling, what would have happened to you? My company would have been furious. They'd insured a worthless fake for £200,000 based partly on my recommendation. I'd have been fired, possibly sued. My career would be over. His voice dropped to a whisper. But I didn't kill him, detective. I swear it. I wanted him to be wrong. After Pembroke left, Eleanor said he had motive. Access to the champagne. Knowledge of Sir Edmund's intentions. Indeed. But so did several others. Let's speak with Isabella Frost. I'm curious why a modern sculptor would care about a Renaissance painting. Isabella Frost swept into the room like a force of nature. Even at 2 a.m, she radiated confidence and barely contained energy. She sat with the casual grace of youth, studying Blackwood with open curiosity. Miss Frost, you're a successful modern artist. What brought you to a Renaissance painting unveiling? Lady Margaret has been my patron for 5 years. When she asks me to attend something, I attend. Besides, I was curious about the painting everyone was whispering about. She smiled. Though I confess, I think Renaissance art is terribly overrated. All that religious symbolism and idealized beauty. Give me honest brutality any day. Did you know Sir Edmund Hartley? Her smile faded. He destroyed my first exhibition with a scathing review 7 years ago. Called my work the desperate attention-seeking of a towelless child. It nearly ended my career before it began. Eleanor's pen paused. That's quite a motive for murder, Miss Frost, is it? I should thank him, actually. His review made me famous. Nothing sells like controversy. My pieces now fetch 10 times what they did before his review. She leaned back. Besides, if I wanted revenge, I'd have created a sculpture dedicated to exposing him as the pompous fraud he was. Artists don't use poison, Detective. We use our work. Where were you when the champagne was served? Examining a rather mediocre landscape in the far corner. I was nowhere near the trays. After she left, Blackwood stood and began pacing. We're missing something. The killer knew which glass Sir Edmund would drink from. That requires either intimate knowledge of his habits or control over the distribution. The butler, Harrison? Eleanor suggested. Possible, but unlikely. He served the Ashworth family for 40 years without incident, and he had no apparent motive. Blackwood stopped pacing suddenly. Unless someone paid him. Eleanor, have Carter look into Harrison's finances. Any sudden deposits, any unexplained income. But even as he gave the order, Blackwood felt they were chasing shadows. The answer was here, in the gallery, hidden in plain sight like his brother's signature in the painting. At 3 a.m, Inspector Carter returned with news. Harrison's finances are clean. No unusual deposits. But I have something else. He held up a small bottle. We found this in the kitchen rubbish bin, cyanide, hidden under vegetable peelings. Fingerprints? Wiped clean. But there's a chemist's label purchased yesterday from Harrington's Pharmacy on Baker Street. Carter consulted his notes. I sent a constable to wake the chemist. He remembers the sale. The buyer signed the poison register as required by law. And the signature was Dr. Catherine Wilde. The room fell silent. Eleanor gasped. The restoration expert? But why would she? Because she had everything to lose, Blackwood said slowly, the pieces finally falling into place. Eleanor, bring me the authentication documents for the Caravaggio. All of them. 10 minutes later, surrounded by papers, Blackwood found what he was looking for. Dr. Wilde's authentication report, signed and notarized. But when he held it up to the light, he could see faint indentations beneath her signature, the ghost of an erased signature. She authenticated it twice, Blackwood said. The first time she declared it a forgery. Then she changed her mind, or someone changed it for her. Blackmail, Eleanor breathed. Someone forced her to authenticate the forgery. Precisely. And when Sir Edmund discovered the truth, she killed him to prevent the exposure that would destroy her career and possibly reveal the blackmail. Blackwood stood. But there's still a missing piece. Who commissioned the forgery? Who blackmailed Dr. Wilde? And who has been orchestrating this entire charade? The answer came from an unexpected source. The young constable guarding the painting called out, "Detective, there's someone at the servants' entrance. Says he needs to speak with you urgently. Says he's your brother." Adrian Blackwood looked 10 years older than his actual age. Prison had been cruel, etching lines into his face and stealing the arrogant confidence that had once defined him. He stood in the gallery, soaking wet from rain, staring at his forgery with something like pride mixed with regret. "Hello, Marcus," he said quietly. "I heard about the murder. I thought you might need my help." "You created this forgery?" Blackwood said. "It wasn't a question. I did. It's the finest work I've ever done. Painted it using a genuine 17th century canvas I bought from a dealer in Rome. period-appropriate pigments, perfect technique. It would have fooled everyone. He paused. It did fool everyone except Sir Edmund. He was always the most brilliant critic of his generation. Who commissioned it? Adrian's laugh was bitter. That's the interesting part, isn't it? I created it on speculation, intending to sell it to a private collector who wouldn't ask too many questions. But someone stole it from my studio 3 months ago. Stole it, created false provenance documents, and sold it to Lady Margaret for £200,000. His eyes met his brother's. I didn't kill Sir Edmund, Marcus. But I know who did. Tell me. The person who stole my forgery. The person who had the knowledge to create convincing provenance documents. The person who stands to profit most from the painting's sale. He pointed. James Thornbury. The art dealer had been standing in the doorway, and now he smiled a cold, calculated expression that transformed his urbane features into something predatory. Very clever, Adrian. Almost correct. But you're missing one crucial detail. Thornbury stepped into the room, and Blackwood noticed the small pistol in his hand. I didn't work alone. From behind him emerged Dr. Catherine Wilde, her face pale but determined. And beside her, to Blackwood's shock, stood Oliver Ashworth. A conspiracy, Blackwood said calmly, though his hand inched toward the police whistle in his pocket. How very organized. It was simple, really, Thornbury explained. Oliver discovered Adrian's forgery while visiting his studio. They'd met at a party, you see. Oliver realized we could use it to solve his financial problems and make all of us wealthy. He stole the painting. I created the provenance and found a buyer, Lady Margaret, who was desperate for a masterpiece to cement her. LEGSCY Dr. Wilde authenticated it after Oliver threatened to expose a youthful indiscretion that would have ended her career. And when Sir Edmund discovered the truth, Eleanor asked, her voice steady despite the gun. We had no choice, Dr. Wilde said miserably. Oliver obtained the cyanide. I told him which champagne glass Sir Edmund always chose, the second from the left on the right tray. He always took that one. I'd observed him at a dozen gallery events. Oliver poisoned it while Harrison was in the kitchen. Oliver's face was flushed with champagne and fear. He was going to expose everything. We couldn't let that happen. So you ransacked his study and stole his letter, Blackwood said. Which we've already burned, Thornbury confirmed. And now, Detective, you're going to let us leave. All of us. Because if you don't, this gallery will become a bloodbath. But Thornbury had made a critical error. He'd been so focused on Blackwood that he hadn't noticed. Inspector Carter and 3 constables quietly entering through the servants' door that Adrian had left open. At Blackwood's subtle signal, they rushed forward. The confrontation was brief. Thornbury fired once, the bullet shattering a window, before Carter tackled him. Dr. Wilde collapsed in tears. Oliver tried to run, but was caught before he reached the door dot as dawn broke over London. The 3 conspirators were led away in chains. Adrian stood beside his brother, watching the police wagons depart. I'll have to testify, Adrian said quietly, about creating the forgery. Yes, Blackwood agreed. You will, and you'll likely face charges. I know, but Marcus, I'm sorry for everything, for the shame I brought our family, for being too proud to ask for help when I needed it. Blackwood adjusted his hat, his expression softening slightly. Pride is a dangerous thing, Adrian. It makes us believe we're cleverer than we are. Sir Edmund Hartley learned that lesson too late, as did our 3 killers. What will happen to the painting? It will be destroyed, I expect. Once it's served as evidence. Blackwood looked at the forgery one last time. Though I confess, it's a shame. It truly is a masterpiece of deception. Eleanor approached, her notebook finally closed. Mr. Blackwood, How did you know it was a conspiracy? I thought Dr. Wilde was the sole killer. She purchased the cyanide, yes, but she lacked the nerve to commit murder alone. I could see it in her eyes. And the poisoning required knowledge that Oliver possessed Sir Edmund's champagne preference. But Oliver lacked the sophistication to create the forgery scheme. That required Thornberry's expertise in provenance and art dealing. Each conspirator had a piece of the puzzle. Together, they nearly committed the perfect murder. Nearly, Eleanor said with satisfaction. Nearly, Blackwood agreed. But they made one fatal error. They underestimated the victim. Sir Edmund Hartley spent 40 years studying art and human nature. He knew that when you're dealing with something as valuable as a masterpiece, whether real or forged, someone is always willing to kill for it. Lady Margaret emerged from her office, aged a decade by the night's events. Marcus, what will become of my gallery? That depends on you, Margaret. You were deceived, yes, but you also allowed your ambition to blind you to warning signs. Sir Edmund tried to tell you the truth, and you dismissed him. She nodded slowly. I know. I wanted so desperately to own something magnificent, to be remembered for something more than inherited wealth. Instead, I'll be remembered for this. She gestured at the crime scene. But there's something I can do. Victoria Somerset told me about the Goldstein family. If the original Caravaggio, the real one, is out there somewhere, I'll dedicate the rest of my life and fortune to finding it and returning it to its rightful owners. That, Blackwood said gently, would be a fitting legacy. As the morning sun finally broke through London's clouds, Detective Marcus Blackwood and Eleanor Hayes walked out of the Ashworth Gallery. Behind them, the forged masterpiece hung in silent testimony to human ambition, greed, and the deadly consequences of deception. Mr. Blackwood, Eleanor said as they reached his car, may I ask you something personal? You may ask. Your brother, will you visit him after the trial? Blackwood was silent for a long moment, watching the city wake around them. I will. Not because I forgive him for his crimes, but because he helped us catch 3 murderers. And because, despite everything, he's still my brother. Family is complicated, Eleanor. It's messy and painful and often disappointing. But it's also what makes us human. That's very wise, sir. No, Eleanor. It's simply true. Now come. We have a report to write, and I suspect Inspector Carter will want our testimony by this afternoon. As they drove through London's streets, Eleanor made one final note in her notebook. Case closed. Justice served. But at what cost? The answer, she knew, would haunt everyone involved for the rest of their lives. Sir Edmund Hartley had died seeking truth in art. In the end, he'd found a different truth, that the most dangerous forgeries aren't paintings at all, but the lies people tell themselves about who they are and what they're capable of. The Ashworth Gallery would never host another unveiling. The Caravaggio forgery would be destroyed, and 3 conspirators would face the gallows for murder, but somewhere in London, locked in a vault or hanging in a private collection, the real Caravaggio might still exist. And if Victoria Somerset had anything to say about it, it would one day find its way home to the Goldstein family, a masterpiece returned, a wrong righted, a truth finally told. Detective Marcus Blackwood adjusted his hat one final time and drove into the morning light, ready for whatever case awaited him next. Because in a city of 8 million people, there would always be another mystery, another murder, another truth hidden beneath layers of deception, and he would be there to uncover it.